I'm Gale Edwards. I'm Australian, but I've spent a lot of my life living in London, where I've directed lots of Shakespeare's and classics and musicals and operas. And I got the great pleasure and privilege of working here at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival because Bill Rausch came and saw a production of Edward II that I directed recently in Washington. I've worked quite a bit in the States, and I was thrilled when he asked me to come here. I love it. I'm working my way through the canon. I think I'm up to 16 Shakespeare plays that I've done, and I'd like to do them all before I die, please God. But Macbeth has slipped through the net. It's a play that's obsessed me for many, many years, and I knew the right time and the right circumstances would eventually come. I've nearly done it a couple of times, and for various reasons it didn't happen. So I feel this is quite prophetic and important that at last, this play has come into my orbit at a company like this. A lot of the Shakespeares I've done have been the big dark ones. I seem to have a penchant for those kinds of plays. I love the Jacobeans. And I've done Richard III, and I've done King Lear with Geoffrey Rush playing the fool. In Australia. I've done Richard III in Washington, Taming of the Shrew, which is quite dark, I think, even though it's meant to be a comedy, and Hamlet, of course, and recently Titus Andronicus, which has to be the darkest of them all. I mean, what a terrifyingly cruel play. So Macbeth inhabits a territory that I've done a lot of work in. I think I'm probably the only director in Australia, at least, who's directed both of Webster's plays, The White Devil and The Duchess of Malfi, at the RSC in London. So it's my territory. I enjoy the big, dark, epic landscape. I enjoy getting my hands dirty with human psychology. I think Shakespeare has an extraordinary insight into what makes us human. And he's quite happy to explore the great negatives and the great pluses of that statement. So I'm prepared to go to the place. It's a difficult play. I think Macbeth is a very difficult play to do. It would be easy for it to become an unsympathetic world because of the nature of the piece. But what it has to say about violence and today is very contemporary. You know, this is a world built on war, a world built on violence. That has a lot of connotations for our own existence. It deals with us controlling the battle between good and evil within ourselves. I totally believe that the witches are Macbeth's stream of consciousness. They are his own desires, unspoken, forbidden taboos. They give him permission to do what he's already thought about doing. So I'm fascinated by the dark psychology of that. One of the mysteries of the play, I think, is that Malcolm is crowned in the end. And one of the unsolved questions posed by the play is what happens to Fleance, Banquo's son, who, of course, the witches have prophesied that it's Banquo's children who will be kings, the lineage of kings. We know that Shakespeare wrote the play for James. James was on the throne at the time. And of course, James was a distant relative of Banquo, so he had to write that because it was an affirmation of his own monarch. So here is a play in which the witches prophesy that Banquo's son will be a king, but he disappears from the play. And the person who's crowned at the end is Duncan's son, Malcolm. So I'm really interested in that, and I think that's going to be one of the interesting signatures of this production, because I'm going to try and unravel that mystery. I'm going to tell the Fleance story in a way that I have never seen it played before. I haven't seen every production of Macbeth, but I'm really concentrating on untying that riddle. I've not seen a great production of Macbeth. I've seen the play many, many times. I've usually felt unsatisfied by it when I've seen it. So one does not approach this play lightly as a director. It has a lot of difficult challenges. One of them is that very early on in the piece, we're on a downward spiral. You know, the play is generally without comedy. There's the porter scene, but it's generally without comedy. Very early on in the script, Macbeth is harnessed to the story of ambition, vaulting ambition, and that murder, and it plummets very quickly from that position. We're asked to invest in a relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. In the beginning of the play, they split up. Halfway through the play, they have nothing more to do with each other, really. After the banquet scene, she goes mad in private. They never play another scene together. So after the audience investment in that relationship, the relationship cracks asunder. Now, a director has to find a way to make that a positive in the storytelling, not a negative. So they're things that you really have to address. Who do we love in the play? What character do we identify with? That's a big question for a director. You know, why should we care? Why should we go on listening? Is Macbeth just a monster? Is she just a monster? I don't think that's particularly riveting theatre. I don't think that's why we go to the theatre. We want much more complex storytelling than that. So I think it's got a lot of challenges. Who are the witches in today's world? You know, what is their cauldron? Where did they come? How do we convincingly put witches on a stage? How does the Burnham wood move? How do you stage that convincingly? How do you bring this play into a sort of contemporary world? And they're all the challenges that a director faces, and I'm coming up against all of them with my designers and with my actors. And of course, that's the thrill of the chase.